Marshall Gaines had never planned to start over at 58, but life doesn't exactly consult anyone before it dismantles your best-laid plans. After 3 decades in precision contract manufacturing and one ill-advised partnership with a boutique metalworking outfit that imploded under the weight of deceit and unpaid invoices, Marshall didn't just walk away from a job. He walked away from a way of life. No more meetings, no more committees, no more decisions made by people who couldn't tell a drill press from a dishwasher. He wanted land, clean air, a house he could fix with his own hands, and silence. That's how he ended up just outside city limits, on the edge of a Cimarron enclave, where road signs hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration and neighbors waved but rarely spoke. The house wasn't fancy, a 1980s ranch with a detached garage and enough yard to build something real. But it was sturdy. It had potential. Marshall didn't need more than that. His first year was spent restoring, sanding, reinforcing, replacing pipes that rattled like wind chimes, hand-tightening beams that sagged like old shoulders. He poured himself into crafting a modest but elegant workshop in a backyard, taking on private machining gigs from those who valued quiet quality. The neighbors left him alone. A few waved in the early mornings. An older couple brought cookies once, then never again. That was just fine by Marshall. He knew there was a community board. What neighborhood didn't have one these days? But he checked before closing. No mandatory fees, no binding covenants. Just voluntary participation in road upkeep and seasonal potlucks. He signed the standard paperwork, paid his road maintenance share, kept his driveway shoveled, and his music low. To him, that was what being a good neighbor meant. Then she showed up. Her name was Denise Albright. Blonde, linen bloused, even in cold weather, hair pulled tight like a tennis instructor in a courtroom drama. Always with an iPad tucked under one arm like a legal sword. She introduced herself with that rehearsed cheerfulness of real estate agents and DMV supervisors. Compliance coordinator for the neighborhood board, she said. She said it like it meant something. Marshall, elbow deep in a wheelbarrow of gravel, didn't smile. He listened. She talked about aesthetic harmony, community visual standards, and integration visibility. What she meant was, your house doesn't look like the others. I don't like that. He thanked her, politely, then went back to his shovel. She didn't return for a while, but he caught her peering occasionally from the sidewalk, squinting at his shutters, tilting her head at his brick edging, shaking her iPad like a priest with holy water. Then came the note. Folded paper, no envelope, and signed. It complained about the reclaimed brick edging he'd installed from a local demolition site. Marshall ignored it. The bricks were his, neatly set, no obstruction. Months passed. He built a side patio. Nothing huge, 10 by 10 feet, shaded by a timber canopy, strong enough to hold up in a storm. No permits required. County regulations were clear. He double-checked. Hand-tightened every bracket. Locally treated wood. He drank coffee there in the mornings. Whiskey in the evenings. And that's when Denise started showing up again. At first it was just walks. Then, questions cloaked in curiosity. Was the patio temporary? Commercial? Did he check with the board? His answers were short. Firm. Yes. No. Not applicable. She didn't like that. One foggy morning in spring, Marshall was sitting on his patio, sipping from his favorite mug when he heard it. Not a car, but the whiny buzz of a golf cart. He stood, jaw tight. Denise came into view, scarf flapping like a surrender flag caught in the wind. She didn't slow. The cart veered off the paved road, bounced over his gravel, and rammed straight into the side of his patio. Wood cracked. A beam tilted. Denise screeched, not from injury, but indignation. "You are out of compliance," she yelled, climbing out like she was storming a courtroom. Her finger jabbed at the canopy. Her face flushed. Marshall looked from her to the damage, then back. "Calm. Quiet. You just crashed a motorized vehicle into my property," he said. Denise blinked. "It was an accident. Your unauthorized structure distracted me. You want to try that again, with a lawyer present?" Her mouth opened, closed. Pride flared. And that's how it started. Not with a lawsuit. Not with a punch. With a line drawn in gravel. Her rules. His refusal. Marshall didn't call the police right away. He took photos. Tire tracks. Splintered wood. Denise mid-screech, finger pointed like an air raid signal. That afternoon, he filed a non-emergency report at the sheriff's office. No drama. Just the facts. The next day, a new note appeared in his mailbox. Final courtesy reminder. Remove unapproved platform and overhead structure within 14 days or corrective action will commence. No name. No letterhead. Just smug bold text. 3 days later, a letter from his insurance provider arrived. Someone, a board member, unnamed, had reported structural damage. His policy was suspended pending inspection. No mention of the golf cart crash. Only that an incident occurred. Marshall called. Asked if a golf cart counted as a vehicle. The agent hedged. Depends on jurisdiction and whether it happened on a shared pathway. He knew what that meant. Denise had filed a complaint, suggesting the damage happened on community land. A lie, but a bureaucratic one. Then came the zoning complaint, an official letter from the city. Someone requested a review of unpermitted improvements. An inspection was scheduled. Checklist included. Marshall exhaled slowly, face in hands. This wasn't about a patio. It wasn't about bricks or visual harmony. It was about control. A war waged with clipboards and fine print. So he prepared. He hired a structural consultant, a land surveyor, verified his boundaries, checked county zoning. Everything was by the book. But the letters kept coming. Fees, threats of property liens, ominous warnings about visual evidence. All unsigned, all empty, except one bore the name, Denise Albright. He didn't want war. He wanted peace. But peace didn't mean surrender. Then the fake inspectors came. 3 men in clean vests and rented gear. No ideas, no city affiliations. They poked around his patio like bargain bin spies. His neighbor Tom saw the whole thing. Marshall reviewed his cameras. Sent footage to his attorney, Glenn Tavener, a quiet, deliberate property lawyer. Glenn responded immediately. Don't confront. I'll handle it. The next letter was an invoice. $150 per day for noncompliance. $50 processing fees. $100 late fee for a notice Marshall had never received. It was signed digitally, sloppily, by Denise. Glenn sent a cease and desist. But the harassment evolved. Deliveries blocked. Access signs appeared. Planks stolen. Karen showed up again, this time gesturing to someone off camera while pointing at Marshall's shed. It was intimidation. A week later, flyers circulated. A proposed rule change. Retroactive regulations for patios and canopies. No vote. No input. Just decree. Glenn and Marshall responded with procedural challenges. Filed complaints. Escalated to state offices. Quietly. Methodically. That same night, Marshall found red letters spray painted on his sidewalk. This isn't yours. He didn't react. Just documented it. Neighbors began to speak. Quietly. Then openly. What photos? Another offered testimony. Slowly, the silence around him cracked. Glenn compiled it all into a formal case. Fake invoices, fabricated inspections, misused authority. Then came the laminated notice. Administrative hold pending review. Unauthorized occupancy may result in fines or removal. It looked official. It wasn't. Glenn brought it to the sheriff's office. The lieutenant didn't roll his eyes. He made calls, filed reports. For the first time, the board was no longer insulated. Then came the lawsuit. Denise, joined by 2 other board members, sued Marshall for defamation and obstruction. It wasn't real. It was theater. Marshall didn't back down. He countersued, with every piece of evidence attached. Then came the fire. It was small, controlled. A warning. The fire department called it suspicious. The court granted a subpoena. Internal board emails revealed it all. Manipulated votes, pre-written outcomes, and worst, collaboration with a private developer. Marshall's address was on a list marked, for sale in 6 months. The final hearing wasn't dramatic. Marshall testified plainly. Glenn laid out the facts. Denise denied, twisted, evaded. But the email spoke louder. Did you approve these actions without a formal vote? the judge asked. I acted in the neighborhood's best interest, Denise said. The judge nodded, entered it into the record. Denise was removed by emergency vote. Her house went dark. No sale, no signs, just silence. Marshall didn't cheer. He cleaned his shop, repaired his canopy, sat in peace for the first time in over a year. Neighbors stopped by, brought drinks, shared stories. One looked at Marshall and said, "You held up better than most would have." He didn't gloat. He smiled. He took down the warning signs. Not because the world was safe, but because his place had been claimed and kept. On the edge of the patio, beneath the timber canopy that started it all, Marshall mounted a hand-carved sign. It read, "Built to last."